Can we restart? We had finished in if right. We will try to restart in if right.
So let's go back to the. Unfortunately, I'm having some trouble here. Well, if there's a resource that is great for all the trainers is to have the opportunity to be able to use a little bit a video from time to time. It helps us rest the voice and to shift the attention of the trainee. Today I don't have this possibility because for some reason the software doesn't allow me to play the video today. So we're going to continue with the previous module about European politics, world politics and local politics regarding transport in the horizon of 15 to 50 years in terms of future, and especially the concerns that exist with the modal and modal transport. So we saw that the United States were the only one that had a unique conception of intermodal transport, that see it as a means of transport as a whole. Our European way is still limited by modules. Well, it's not easy to see here on the picture the way the maritime traffic is divided in the several ports, but I believe it's easy to see that each of these groups represents a port. And then we have these little lines here who represent the evolution of the modal split during the time, given that the top line is the most the oldest situation, and the lowest bar is the most recent. The last data being referred to 2011. I don't have them for all the ports, but in some of them I have 2011 data. The clearest segment here is about road traffic. The darker one is a railway, and one that we sometimes don't even see is river transport, or to use a more correct definition, the inland waterways. So we have here an example here of a port where these waterways have a reasonable weight, and we have here some ports who are basically based on road traffic. If in some cases there's been a great growth of alternatives to road traffic, especially where we've been trying to implement alternatives to these routes, it's in Northern Europe, in Scandinavian countries mainly, and in Northern Europe, especially in Rotterdam. Rotterdam is planning within 20 years approximately to do a great modal transfer and try to use more and more inland waterways, and try to use more as well railways, and also reduce the weight of road traffic that has still a great influence. In most of the ports here, the road transport is still being used. It has been losing some influence lately, but it's still one of the main means of transport, the most important one. The data that we gathered from Eurostat has the modal split across Europe with the different transport means. Starting with the inland waterways, as I told you before, we have here two countries of the Black Sea who have a great split of inland waterways because of Romania and Bulgaria, and of course here Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany already have a modal split that is quite great as well. But we can't be too optimistic with that dark green, because the percentage part is very wide. When it comes to railways, we can see that the countries who use it the most for intermodal split are countries from the center of Europe and northern countries. We can see here that in the Iberian Peninsula, we still have a presence in a railway modal split. We still have that is still superior to our Spanish neighbors, but even though we have 12 or 11%, I believe it's in the map that I gave you with the first case study, you can see the modal split that we have here in Portugal, and the position of railway and the position of roadway. Here we have the modal split for roadways in Italy, in the Iberian Peninsula. It remains the complementary mode of the maritime transport, the most used, the preferential one. And we also have here the short sea shipping that operates in the peripheric maritime peripheric area of Europe. So we can see that all of these countries have a very important dynamic in terms of modal split by short sea shipping. We foresee that the growth rates of container transports, the rate will increase in itself. It has been increasing during the late years, but we believe it's going to increase even further at a global level. The exercise that I proposed to was to analyze a video of European initiative that is about the IFRAC to see how the technology works, but it's basically this main part just for you to catch some information and to see the way the dissemination and the sharing is made, to do that in real time for all kinds of loads. Now we are entering the last area of our theme, that is intermodal transport, the economic aspects in lesser environmental scale and the social aspects as well of intermodal transport and the part of economic sustainability. This study is still the base. So we take a freight here going from Singapore to Basel, and we see the ways the freight can be combined, and we can see what kinds of mix of transport means we can use to reach Basel from Singapore with the container, and what environmental impact as each choice we can make regarding the means of transport or a mix of means of transport. We have here two scenarios, the scenario of Antwerp and the scenario of Rotterdam. There aren't many differences among themselves. The differences are mainly in the mix that we chose to do to make this transport of the cargo. And the differences are important in terms of the time we spend. We know that the maritime segment has a duration that makes our control ability well limited, and our ability to make decisions starts when we choose the maritime way is complemented. And that's why these two ports were chosen here, because these were two ports who had the ability to use the three means of transport who are complementary to maritime transport, both road and railways. So the two The two ports were analyzed, and we proposed the three different choices to complement this maritime transport, and a study was made about time, duration, and environmental impact, exclusively measured in CO2 emissions. It didn't measure anything else in terms of pollution, no other cost, either internal or external, of the different means of transport. And it also measured in terms of effectiveness, the frequency with which we can use each means of transport. So we can see here that the ocean transport and THC, that is the specialist in terms of maritime management, the terminal and link charges, these are the costs that we have with the transposition of means of transport. The maritime freight and the THC have that value. So this study is from 2013. Nowadays, there might be some changes in these values. If we see the case of the combination with maritime transport and road transport, the maritime freight that was made in a great extension only represents a third of the total freight. So door to door, the maritime segment, that is the greater one, only contributes with 1/3 of the cost without using the complementarity with the roadways. With other means of transport, the cost structures are different, given that the only one where the maritime segment is superior or represents more than half of the total cost of the transport, and that it's inland waterways. All the others, the maritime segment that comes from Singapore to Basel, to one of these ports, is less than half. In the case of complementarity with the roadways, we only speak about 1/3 of the cost. So here we can see that there's a main conclusion here, that is the scale economy that maritime transport gives us. If it's such a great distance, and even though we have an input that represents only 1/3 in terms of costs, we see here the great advantage of maritime transport in terms of costs. It's almost impossible to reproduce this cost structure in any other means of transport. Where is maritime transport a bit more penalized, so as to say, that is in the transport time, because it's one of the most important factors, and that's where it loses some of its influence and of its advantages. The first line of this study is common, so we can see it's basically the same for all of them. The first line that has the cost of transport between Singapore and Rotterdam, we can see that the costs are approximately the same. We have a slight difference for Antwerp that is slightly less expensive, but it's very small. Then we can see great differences when it comes to land transportation between the two ports. If you see the land transportation from Rotterdam is approximately 3 times what was the maritime segment from Singapore to Rotterdam, and we have lower costs, but the timing is much greater. Up to 3 days. So in the case of railway, it has a cost that is quite superior to the previous waterway, but still better than transport by land. The road transport still has the frequency that we want. There's basically no limitations or very few constraints. The only constraints that we can have here are, of course, problems related to traffic. That is an issue that is not so frequent in Europe nowadays. The road structure in Europe is mainly based on highways now, so the traffic jam points are very reduced nowadays. The only traffic jam point that we can still have in the roads is the problem of winter in the Pyrenean area. In the first session, we mentioned the problem of the winter in the traffic of the inland of the Douro River that is incompatible with navigation. And in the winter, we also have some problems with traffic in the area of the Pyrenees, especially when there is a lot of snow. The frequency of transport is obviously favorable for road transport, less for inland waterways, and in the middle we have the railway. In terms of environmental impact, railway is the best means of transport. This using, of course, knowledge and technology from 2013. All of this has, might have changed, and there's probably some results that will be completely different in 2015. So we might have the possibility to change the environmental impact in road transport. It's the area, I believe, that is more promising. We'll probably have the possibility to change as well a bit in terms of environmental impact in inland waterways through the use of electric energy in the roads, and through inland waterways through the use of natural gas. Well, we'll have a lot of possibilities to work and to foster a better environmental impact. So this is for the transport policies here in Europe, which doesn't mean that the data might change. In environmental terms, the railway has a great advantage in terms of environmental efficiency, clearly superior to all the other means of transport. As I mentioned during the first day, there are some railway transport operators who offer a product that is completely green without any kind of CO2 emissions. I'm not sure if this will be applied. I'm not even sure how we can base the regulation around a product like that. I can check that the company that this railway operator used exclusively green energy to move the train. I don't know if we can verify this information. I know that in terms of market, it already exists. This offer, this kind of product already exists, and I also know, and that's why the part of traceability and trackability are going to be so important in the future, because they not only enable us to verify the trace in geographic terms that the cargo leaves, but they also enable us to verify the trace that the cargo leaves in these areas in terms, in environmental terms, and also, I believe, in social terms as well, especially people who have brands who are known worldwide, and their concerns with the social responsibility at a worldwide level. So this is how it started, with brands that have a great impact in terms of marketing and who can't be associated to social practices that are considered as violating for basic rights, nor to environmental practices that might introduce damage in something that is the property of the whole society in a global scale, that is the environment.
This does not take into account also, that's why this area is in constant mutation and updates, the changing of the ocean ways. We have one that will be made possible by human intervention, which is the works on the Panama Channel, and the other is the consequence of the bad usage that the humanity does of the environment, which is the opening of the polar ways. All this can reconfigure costs and impact of the transportation of a box from Singapore to Basel. The evolution of technology and of fuel
I'm sorry, we seem to be having some sound difficulty. Will be fixed in a minute. Regarding this paradigm, this leads me to ask a question. We've been talking and we've been saying that two of the fundamental variables of the whole supply chains are the cost and the time at a distance. We also saw the evolution of the great ships and the greater capacity that they develop as time goes by, and as the machinery increases, and the capacity to go the 20,000 TEUs. And given that maritime transport has a great advantage in terms of time, shouldn't part of the innovation be done in an attempt to make the ships faster and also to reduce the unit cost at a great scale?
Okay, there are ships of containers, of fast container ships that have a speed of 25, 30 knots, but the prices of the consumption of fuel are very high, and the problem resides exactly there. The problem of speed in the maritime transport. You're to see the less evolution in velocity in the last century. If you see the transport on wheels had an evolution on the velocity and speed, the aerial also had an evolution in terms of speed that is incredible. But in the maritime way, from the Titanic to the Queen Mary 2, 100 years of evolution of technology, and the speed, it's almost the same. It's stalled. We are in a the mean water that makes it very difficult to evolve navigation regarding speed, right? But I believe that there is legislation now that works as a support to what Rui said, which is legislation that as if it fosters the reduction of emission, the main pollutant of maritime transport, which is sulfur. There is legislation in that sense, but we need to wait, see what we can do more, namely creating ECAs, and from the ECAs I consider it's in a very preliminary state. Probably a few years from now, when those areas are expanded, eventually we will have part of the problem of reducing sulfur emission, and as such we can try to find alternate sources of energy that allow for those ships, container ships, can navigate at higher speeds. That's my train of thought. If I could say something. Still regarding legislation, at the end of this year, the emission of CO2 was already reviewed for the merchant ships. The ships to go on the same velocity need to invest in equipment for new ships to be according with the this regulation that it's mandatory. Well, they need to have more powerful machines regarding ships and conventional propulsion. And so a machine with more power translates in more CO2 emissions. I don't know up to what point the balance and the income on the increase of consumption can be optimized in the point of view of the carrier and the ship owner. Anyone else wants to say something? I'm so sorry that the course from the part of sustainability of maritime transport has been made, because we spoke about the pollution emissions of the ships and all the aspects regarding the sustainability of these transport and the mean of transport on the sea. We spoke about the SECAs, that on those areas the emission levels are completely limited. I believe that it's 0.1% of sulfur. That currently Europe has in the Baltic and Northern Sea. It is indeed reviewed that it will expand to the Mediterranean, and the Americans have part of their coast on the control of emissions of sulfur, which is not the only harmful emission on the ships. I would say that that is the one that has environmental impacts that are the stronger. Impact on health, which is a stronger one. I would not quantify it as the biggest, but the one that has the biggest impact in human health. That's why all the ports are ECA areas. In the ports, the level of emissions are right at the level of the allowed. In the Baltic, on the special emission controlled areas, the ports area is where are more people there. So usually it has a human tissue that's quite dense. That's why all ports are actually SECA areas. Regarding speed, I'm not a naval engineer, but for the perception that I have, and almost as a technician, as a pilot, the resistance to the movement of a ship on the fluid, the increase of speed also increases the resistance, but in the car transportation it's almost the same. The percentage that I increase in power it's not translated in speed, and I have levels from which to have half a knot more, I have a consumption of more 30 or 40%. This has no logic of profitability. These increases are almost marginal, the increases that I can bring to speed, although in fact the limits of emissions have been a catalyst for the research regarding the efficiency of hulls, new paintings on hulls, and new appendixes, trying to create fluxes, flows, air flows, and air bubbles around the hull. Even the helix can be better designed to improve the design of the hull, of the helix, circulation of water bubbles around the hull. Okay, but this goes into a certain range of speed. If we want to do more, we need to have new technology, turbines. These are things that are much more costly. The mean water, it needs to be a rupture in all the knowledge that exists. Almost an epistemological rupture to increase velocity in the water. If you were to see in competition, what do we do to increase the speed of a ship? It's to remove the hull from the water. It's the only way to increase speed. You take the hull out of the water, it comes from the water to the air, and they increase exponentially. In terms of the mechanic of fluids and mechanic of ships, it's not possible to increase the speeds more than this. Even these technologies allows us to reduce for the same speed, to have reduced emissions, and research is going in this direction for the same speed and having an environmental impact that's lower. And here we can see that we can go beyond the point that we are in. Regarding the increase of speed, I don't think so. Even me, I'm not an expert in the area. It doesn't allow us to go beyond. Okay, but these are increases of 2-3% in speed. For the same speed, we can get consumptions that are quite reduced. Okay. The pressure that has been placed, new ships, great container ships, it's in the consumption. They are lowering the speed because the consumption of fuel, it's the decisive factor more than time. I agree, I fully agree with Paulo, but we could join the both things. We are developing a certain aspect, and we can and try to not that this is the focus of the question. The speed thing, I would add something here. When you look for strategies to increase speed or reducing consumptions at the same speed, there is an increase of the possibility of accidents. I don't know if in maritime transport this could happen also. Well, I do believe that this is a tolerable risk that would allows us to go beyond. But in the more dense traffic areas, I think that would bring us some problems. The corridors on the north, the Gibraltar, some areas of dense areas, the English Channel, for example, would bring us some problems that are solved every day in Gibraltar. It has a very high dense traffic with high speed ships, more than 30 knots. What are the ferries that go from Ceuta to Algeciras and that cross the navigation channels? But this is only possible according to a good maritime traffic control system that they have in the Strait of Gibraltar. They have a VTS station for a few years that it's highly efficient and effective, with skills and knowledge that are installed that are quite high. Technology has answered to this increase of speed that, in the case of ships, has been reduced to the ferries. On the ships, on the cargo ships that have a very high displacement, the speed is quite limited and will be for the next few years, where there have been important gains in the reduction of consumption through not only technology, but also through management options. I think that Paulo spoke about this a little bit, teaming through a strategy of management that has implications in consumption. If I have a margin that is sufficiently great to have a transocean beyond the ocean transport 15, 20 days without an impact in the economical activity, it uses a strategy that serves for the carrier, for example. If you remember the first training that we did as the one that ships, as the one that receives the goods, it's the same thing for the carrier because it decreases consumption, makes the same path with a lower consumption. And it can be a strategy that also goes according to the interests of the carrier himself. During 5 or 6 days has free storage. Storage, I think that I want to believe that you spoke about storage in the logistic area. This has a cost. So for you of the management area, that's why they made it so general. The innovation that the Japanese have brought with Toyota process has brought us was the just-in-time delivery to avoid warehouse time. And I do remember that when I went to Nordic school in my initial phase, in the beginning of the 80s, I had a teacher of loading and that has presented us of a terminal of the future that to me, it left me completely amazed, and most of my colleagues were amazed. That was a little bit like that framework that we speak about, from bringing a little bit of humor of the Jewish people coming when they ran out of Egypt, and all of a sudden the sea opened in two for them to go beyond the sea, and someone represented that painting like a white canvas, and the Jews already passed, the sea is opened, and the Egyptians didn't come yet. So, and teacher Rico Pinto showed us a hull that had nothing. When we were used to see piers with great warehouses and all that structure to keep goods in. So what he presented had nothing, no warehouses. The idea is that the pier was just a place of passing by, a place where nothing stays. They get there, they put the goods, and they are taken away to another place. He was thinking as a Japanese, because storage has a cost. In case of training, it's two areas. The interest of the ship owner that has a cheaper transport, and it can serve also the carrier because it has for a few more days free storage. comments on the study of Price Waterhouses? Or if any of you saw any similar study, because this is the one that I know that is indeed the basis for decisions regarding the investment in transport infrastructures. This is a study made by, it was ordered by the European Union. Competitive advantages of maritime transport. If we see a ship like the MSC Oscar, they allow for almost 11,000 and 1,400 and for 1,100 and a half heavy trucks, or 1,100 cargo planes. So it has a scale that it's not repeatable in other transport means. It has this possibility through the slow steaming. It's quite safe. It's the one that presents less incidents and accidents with human beings. It's not sterile. The activity on board is an activity regarding safety at work, highly aggressive for the human being. It's one of the areas of economic activity where the percentage of accidents with people is the highest. What we have is less people because the unit of cargo that's transported in the maritime transport, it's other of the scale economies.
Scale economies are obtained through the increase of the capacity of the ships with the alliances, with the agreements, and with a global covering and universal covering. So the movement of containers is focused in ports of great dimension. I forgot to mention here in this graphic that I made. The unit is by millions of TEUs. Shanghai is currently the port with the greater movement of containers, followed by Singapore, Shenzhen. China has a series of great ports with a high movement of containers. You can see that we still don't have a single European port. The first to appear is, of course, Rotterdam. We have here Sines and Leixões, Portuguese ports. So this is not as neglectable as it would seem. We can see it. We can forget that Sines began from scratch. It might be 10 or 12 years old, and it started from scratch, and it's already there with more than 1 million of TEUs, and it has a capacity to grow that is basically limitless. And here in Leixões, I believe that we can be proud as well to have more than 500,000 of containers that were moved. So these are 2014 data. We have been experiencing this great growth in the cargo by container with a little stagnation in the last years in terms of growth rate. It has to keep growing. Problems with the maritime transport in terms of competitiveness. The terminal costs, well, maritime transport is mandatorily associated with a change of means of transport. We can't avoid it. And in terms of intermodal transport of containers, we can't avoid it. There are some areas in private ports of industrial entities where we can almost skip this process in a mean switch to road transport, but maritime transport is almost always associated with a node at the beginning of the transport and another at the end, and all of this has costs. These nodes have costs, and they create delays. So they have a financial costs and also time costs, who can be translated into financial costs as well. So these are very expensive infrastructures. The ports are expensive infrastructures. That's why in most places all around the world, these are infrastructures that are managed publicly. There are a few terminals who are private within public ports. But except the English case where there was a transfer of port property to a public entity, to a private entity, in the rest of the ports, well, I believe there's a private port in Malaysia as well, but in most of the ports worldwide, they are the property of public entities that in the beginning were not only owners but also managed the space, and they have been abandoning the space management of the port and have been transferring this management to private entities. And in some cases, it has originated great world operators. For example, Singapore was the second world port and was the first for a long time. In this port, everything was together and was the property of the same entities. Property and management were together, and then it was divided and put everything in the hands of the state. Both, so we have an entity that is the owner, and then we have the entity that makes the management. And these are state entities that grew at a global scale and that has now terminals in the whole world. They have one here in Portugal, that is the terminal of Sinch. That is the most dynamic terminal, and that has registered the most growth rates. But there are also terminals in Rotterdam, so it's a global operator, but still being a public entity. Dubai Ports is another very well-known example. It appeared in the same way. There was a spin-off from the space management and the ownership in Dubai. In the United States, well, there are great problems with the service concessions in this case, because the United States reevaluated their politics of ports concession, as we do it in Europe and as it is done as well there. The commercial exploration of the port can be given to a private entity. When it comes to Dubai ports, they acquired Pindo ports that had several terminals in the United States, and the fact that Dubai ports had its main office in an Arabic country has created lots of reactions in political terms in the United States, such that Dubai ports eventually gave up the idea of keeping the ports it had acquired from the other company in the United States and just gave it to third parties. So a part of these parts, it's a global infrastructure manager company. These infrastructures are very high maintenance. Some of them have natural conditions that do not require a lot of maintenance, but here in Leisringe, for example, we have great expenses regarding maintenance to maintain the funds, to maintain cars, to maintain what we need to be able to receive the ships that we use during the year. Every year we have had many operations. dredging here in Leishmann. Sinj doesn't have that problem, but besides these dredging problems, there are other operations that that are important for the maintenance of the infrastructure. Of course, the maintenance of the floors, where vehicles with great cargo have to be able to circulate. Well, comparing with the rest of the infrastructures, we also need means to be able to manipulate the ships, be able to circulate. Of course, we have the tugs as well, who are also economic means, who need a lot of investment in terms of capital. We have great constructions, great buildings, but less and less. But great part of the costs in the ports has to do with these buildings that require lots of capital to be built and to be maintained. Then, so we can see that the maritime mode is not adapted to door-to-door sailing. Of course, we'll need another means of transport more flexible to end. It's a means of transport that is quite slow, and there's nothing we can do for now about it. It's a part that is not variable. So in maritime transport, it is a slow means of transport. We don't have such a great flexibility that, well, there's not a complete lack of flexibility, but there is a little lack of flexibility. One of the problems of the ships of great dimension, for example, is the fact that they lose flexibility. There's only half a dozen ports where they can actually go. So the smaller ships can go to other ports and be integrated in another network. In this case, there are only half a dozen ports where these ships can actually go and connect with the rest of the transport network. So they depend all the time on other means of transport to be able to do the last kilometers. They're more efficient in terms of energy. In maritime transport, we use this argument a lot to try to overcome some requirements in environmental terms. So we defended that we were more efficient in energetical terms, and at some point we weren't able to overcome that regulations anymore. So now there's a limitation of pollution emissions of ships. That is a concept from EMO, emission control areas. And it's a regulation that the European Union tried to anticipate and to take further, trying to anticipate dates that were predicted to try to control these emissions. It's a means of transport that is very adapted to demography that exists worldwide, because great part of the population is in the littoral part. So it's adapted to the demography, and it's the means that better does the internationalization of external costs. We can see that road transport and railway transport do not do this internationalization as well as maritime transport. It's the means of transport that has less environmental impact in terms of gas emissions, especially CO2 emissions. And one of the great scale wins regarding the dimension of the ships is in this area. The ships of greater port with a greater cargo capacity have lesser levels of emissions, and we're speaking about grams of CO2 emitted by tons of transport. So these are data that can be compared, and even so, there are considerable gains in terms of energetic efficiency. And just to go back a little bit regarding some comments that were made here when we were speaking about speed and the reduction of emissions and energetical effectiveness. These new ships that have been built of greater dimension are also more effective in terms of energy. One of the operators, Maersk, that is the great representative for introducing the concept of tripway, and it's environmentally more efficient. Transport, both road and railway transports, have a series of costs that are never internalized. So the problem of the traffic jam that is created by the trucks, it's not the case anymore in some countries. In the European Union, for example, we have a very efficient highway network that solves this problem of traffic jam caused by trucks, but this problem is not reduced to zero, as well as the accidents that are caused by good transport by truck. The noise effect, of course, is not neglectable as well. Maritime transport doesn't have such an impact in that aspect, but in terms of railway transport and road transport, it's a factor. In terms of pollution, the railway mode is still the most effective in environmental terms. We can't say the same thing about road transport, because with road transport, obviously the trucks will have to circulate, even if they circulate in ways that are specific for good circulation, they are going to have to pass in areas with a great demographic density. That's where the consumption centers are, and so it's inevitable that they should pass through these areas, and they have a great impact in terms of air pollution. In terms of climate change contributions, I'll leave to your to your idea, the opinion you might have on climate change. And of course, so we spoke about the noise, the air pollution, the accidents, the climate changes. These are the main constraints of road transport. These are external costs that are not always internalized in the costs of these two transport means, both road transport and railway transport. They're very hard to quantify, not impossible, but rather difficult. And right now, the tax system that also exists on this transport means does has not negative effects on any of these transports. It does not penalize any of these transports. I just remembered something regarding Alliance Texas. Because of the tax system that is subject to, well, Texas was, as you know, the United States have a decentralized system compared to our system, and Alliance Texas pays taxes to entities. Between local and federal entities, it pays taxes to 8 different entities. The nodes are factors that can both dynamize and also constrain the way intermodal networks work. They have different missions depending on the means of transport that appear in these nodes. The maritime transport mean the node is just to receive and to send cargo. When it comes to nodes that have a greater predominance of the railway and road transport, these are nodes that allow us to do other operations related to the cargo, namely those who are generally reserved to platforms and logistics centers. And nowadays, what back then seemed to be a great gap that was introduced by the airport of added value. Nowadays, we speak about the port of added value as well, that in these distribution centers, it's not possible to do it in the maritime port. So they have these functions of receiving and sending cargo. It's a crossing point for two means of transport. But in this distribution center, it's possible to add other services to the cargo. We might speak about it in the logistic area. Maybe you did it already, but I'm going to share with you the discovery in the logistic centers after that phase of deconsolidation of the cargo. We can provide services, for example, for textiles who go to shops, to be able to iron these textile pieces so they can go better to the store. So these are added values that can be added in these terminals and that can be delivered to the customer. Depending on the kind of terminal, we have different functions and different processes that occur in the terminal. There are processes that only occur in the piers and in the docks, and others occur outside the docks, and other processes that ports like l'échange, processes that are generally made in docks, we are trying to transfer them outside the docks to try and earn some space. That's what ports like l'échange here, who have great constraints regarding space, they are trying to move some operations in areas that are close to the docks, and that was the idea that led to the building of logistic poles here. And some researchers call this process the agile port concept. If you do some research regarding the literature about intermodality and maritime transport, this is the agile port concept, which means that it's a port that is able to make the management with a little space, still managing a great amount of cargo units. Do you want to say something?
There are air conditionings in l'échange port have no CFCs anymore. I think it's important to say no CFC emissions. We're speaking about sustainability, so I think advantages of intermodality itself. The number of advantages, it's in proportion to the number of modal combinations that are possible. We can have here options of tailor-made network. Each cargo uses the network that it's more effective and can use the different modes of effectiveness and efficiency. Each cargo can be interested in having a modal combination that's more efficient environmentally, the most natural one, a combination more efficient in economic terms, which is usually what is in the first degree of a preference, in the first line of decision, or it can wish for a combination that it's faster, the intermodal transport, it's possible to adjust the combination to the needs of each user. It can be a tailor-made, it does not have to be standardized, it can be tailor-made, it can be useful either for logistic processes that or manufacturing processes just in time where there is no storage, where the intermediate products get here at the same time that I need to fabricate my finished product, or I can use the network to do a little bit of management of what I have in Mobilize, taking advantage of not doing the storage exclusively in a traditional warehouse, doing the warehousing in the own mean of transport. To be able to use the best of both worlds, the combination of the quickness of the mean of transport for some segments of the total path of the product, according with the economic efficiency of maritime transport. It's supposed to be cheaper than the exclusively road traffic. Today it is cheaper. It is with these variables that we need to work with. It is significantly less, has less pollution than the road traffic. We saw this in that analysis from Singapore to Basel, that any of the other combinations would be less pollutant than the combination with roadway. So the advantages are quite significant. More reliable. It gives the possibility of reverse logistics. I believe that the last 2 days you have spoken about reverse logistics. You have this concept in your mind, right? It's not complex at all. It's to gather of what has defects and problems with the part that it's waste. If it's bottled water, the bottle will be gathered and harvested and carried the other path. Environmentally, it's more efficient, and it makes possible many schemes of competition between transport modes, areas in where we have clear advantages in cooperation and interests competing for the business. Each mode has a cost structure, differentiated cost structure. Some had more costs with the immobilized part, another with the exploration. The case of road transport, it is a case in where the cost of fuel have a bigger weight, that it's significantly bigger, has a very huge weight, the cost with work. If you remember of the image of the MSC Oscar and the trucks, I think it has 20 crew members. If each truck has one driver, it's 11,400 drivers. The cost on the road transport compared with the work cost, it's completely smaller. Regarding structure of costs, on the dry part we have land, and the rolling stock. Regarding the maritime, we have costs with port terminals. This part is clearly disadvantageous for the maritime transport. the floor itself, the terrain itself, the land have more value, the ones who are in front of the sea. And that's where the port terminals work. Even in terms of inland ports, they have a lot of value because they have the contact with a mirror of water. It's highly penalizing for the maritime transport. Yes, Paulo. But these piers, we are speaking about a small dimension. When we have the roads and the railway, there are great extensions of rails. When they calculate what it's more expensive here, are they taking into account all the road network and all the railway that exists? Because by experience, it seems to me that this needs to be taken into account. Okay, I would say that in my business area, the rural and the agricultural land, I think it's around €1 by square meter, more or less. Urban land in front of water reaches €1,000 by square meter. Okay, but the relationship, it's quite different also. Well, I don't know that beyond the road, while the pier, the port is used exclusively by the maritime transport, the road has other users that help to fix the cost. Except the private lanes that we have, that's exclusive. The railway has exclusive railways for cargo, has no usage of passengers. The general roadway has a mixed usage. Most of the railway has a mixed usage also. But there are some routes of railway and roadway that have an exclusive use for cargo. That route that we spoke in the Netherlands, it's exclusively for cargo. It has a cost, I don't know, about, I saw the numbers, it's around several millions, thousands of euros. As well as the Alameda corridor, only for cargo. But the general part of these two infrastructures allows for a mixed usage. Terminals, equipment, it's important. Ships are the fixed costs, the operational costs, in one and the other, maintenance, cost of work, and the cost of fuel. Maritime has an advantage in the part of the operational costs and clear disadvantages in the part of fixed costs, but that we've saw that already. It allows in the global perspective to offer a very advantageous solution. I would like someone to tell me the hours because I need to know to organize my work. Maritime mode shows its scale costs where it increases the distance. If we see here in this graphic, the road mode for short distances has great advantages, and the maritime way it's the more costly one. Starting from medium distances, it becomes the most advantageous mean of transport in economic terms. We spoke about this a little bit already. The property of the infrastructure, of highways, ports, airports. Property from the infrastructure part, it's public from public authorities. The part that relates to the mobile, to the operational part, is part of private entities. We are addressing investments in the infrastructure parts that are throughout several decades, even regarding accountancy. I think it's Rui, it's from the economy area, the immobilized, it's amortized at 50 years. I don't know. Yes. 50. I think it's almost more time to amortize. It has long amortization. You know that the costs you know already are the part of mobile elements. There is an important difference here between the maritime mean and the rest of them regarding vehicles. That has nothing to do with in the operational costs and the other in the immobilized. Everything that's immobilized, the rates of change cannot be fast because I cannot change the structure of the late-range port. Any work, maritime work, needs a deadline that's very big. We need to elaborate the financing project of the infrastructure, very detailed, very long. It needs for a contract modality that it's adapted to the development of the infrastructure. It's not always developed by the same entity. If you are to see the case of Sines, the concessionary, which is PSA of the build operating transfer, is the only concessionary that has the construction of the pier, but it's a port authority that needs to build the protection piers, and those two things are not separated. These are processes that take longer, and they have needs of financing that are quite complex. That's why they are of the responsibility of public entities and authorities. Unlike vehicles and removing ships from immobilized and putting them on the operational part, have been subject to very quick changes. In terms of energy efficiency, in terms of environmental efficiency, in ships, in terms of management of the inland space, or where the container, cellularized containers, all of these container ships have this grid on the deck, on the superstructure, some grids, some nets made in steel that are completely cellularized ships. It allows them to have a quickness on cargo operations, but load and unload operations, it has an increased quickness that the need of what it's made aboard, which is the fixation of the cargo to the ship in order that the ship's cargo won't fall or not fall to the side and suffer no damage. On these cellularized ships has been the technological evolution for the last few years. There is no need to do what you do in the smaller ships. There needs to be someone that goes there and puts a stretcher and fixation elements to the ship. On the cellularized ships, this technological change has happened to make it faster for the time that the ship stays at the port. To move 6,000 or 5,000 containers in 24 hours, you need to be quite quick. That would be incompatible with the manual fixation of each container as it happens in smaller ships. The impact that each transport mean has, or the impact that can be obtained by each mean of transport and each component of the transport mean as an infrastructure, what it results. It's in the variation in the accessibility on the operational part. The vehicles can modify the qualitative profile of the service that I'm offering. For the part of the road transport, I think it's becoming limited. The truck cannot transport more than one container, and the speed is limited by law. So the road networks in Europe are quite well developed. They allow the maximum speeds that are allowed by law. So we cannot go beyond combinations with or between waterways, inland waterways, and the combinations with railway mode allow us to give different structures to the quality of the service that I am able to provide. Regarding the impact that each of these areas has in competition, the infrastructure, because it's an infrastructure, it's a basis of competition. And vehicles that are used for transport are a basis to win a competition advantage. I can offer a vehicle that is cargo friendly, and in railway transport, for example, and because of that history of vibration, it's very important to have means. It's the transport that brings more damage to cargo regarding acceleration. Some cargo are quite sensible to acceleration. We all seen the connections between trailers of train have structures that allow to stand for the effect of the accelerations. The corners, the effect of the centrifugal force can have an additional effect on cargo, and with vehicles that are technologically more evolved, I can acquire some advantage in competition. There is a constant incentive for the technological improvement regarding the operational part of intermodal transport. This graphic, just to show you how in the United States we have a perception, a vision of intermodal transport that is integrated and that competes with the other transport modes per se. But if we see each transport mode individually and we see how we can combine them, we are looking at the transport mode as a mode of transport autonomous for all the others. And that's what has been showing more growth. These data are previous to the 07-08 economical crisis, and up to there, this was a transport mode that has growth rates bigger, the intermodal mode. Just to reinforce this idea, one of the great financial groups worldwide that has invested in the intermodal transport in the United States of the Berkshire Hathaway, what's it called? The main shareholder, the Oracle. I don't remember now. But this is a company that has been investing in intermodal transport using the train. Any questions before addressing the last case study? Can we connect that to the projector? Because I wanted to show you the videos of the last case study, the impact that the intermodal transport has and the different components themselves in the market.
This case study presents two different visions that are maritime transport, but especially what are the intermodal transport nodes, what they're going to be in the future. It's a vision that started from an idea of the forwarders that proposed that the port should be extended to enlarge their activity area. They should broaden this influence area in terms of operations that it generates and try to broaden it to the interior. Another vision is the vision of equipment builders to movement cargo, and what they propose is that maritime terminals should move to the exterior of the coast to try and minimize a series of potential negative impacts that they might have, such as accidents, pollution accidents, to eliminate noise from living areas. These are two future visions, two visions of the future that are both very dependent on what will be the evolution of technology. So they expect that some technology will exist later on that will be able to materialize these visions in the future. Can you please put on the slides that I was presenting? I'm gonna try and put them back on. Joanne, I'm going to need your help. both maritime transport and all the other means of transport have a very important role in the employment in the European Union, both directly and indirectly. This is the video about the freight, and that's the previous one. That's not the last case study, it's the other slide. European ports employ currently approximately 500,000 people directly, and indirectly we believe that they contribute for approximately 3 million jobs. So just think about the number of activities that are necessary to support the activity of a port. Activities, forwarders, navigation agents, ship channelers, the part of naval repairing. There's a series of activities that support the functioning of a port with people who are not directly employed by the port. So a series of services, of accessory services that are in the influence area of the port economically. We believe that this investment that is predicted in the infrastructure until 2020 of these 10T might generate approximately 650,000 additional jobs, and not only in the port. So we're not going to duplicate the number of people employed in the port, but we believe that we're going to insert more than 500,000 people through these investments of the 10T. Once again, these are data that have to be evaluated with some distance here, because this is the number of jobs that we predict will be created with the current technology. Let's remind here that if we implement all these ideas of the trans-European transport networks, one of the ideas, and I'd like to let this very clear, implies a reduction of work posts. So if I'm going to decrease the transport by the road transport, as we saw, it's the one that has a greater work factor, so I'm going to reduce this number in quite a drastic way. But this is going to be compensated in other means that will be much more effective in terms of use of the work factor. To have the same output, these sectors currently use much less work factor. This is the first part. The second part, we all heard about non-tripulated vehicles. We all heard about the Google car. We all heard about the Rolls-Royce project to have ships that are unmanned to navigate. So the impact in the workforce is not that significant, because to transport 20,000 jobs we need 20 people. The impact that this might have in the road transport, this is going to be very significant. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs just in Europe. In terms of work posts of the maritime sector exclusively, there are many opinions nowadays about what is the work market on maritime transport. Some people identify a great lack of workforce. Some people predict for the future. And these are these three scenarios that we see here. First scenario being a growth of the offer of workforce that will overcome the demand. The reference scenario is that up to 2020, the needs in terms of workforce will be balanced, and with the offer and the demand of the world fleet. And there's another scenario with a more dynamic growth of the maritime sector and a greater need of workforce and a significant lack of tripulations for the boats. So it's on this scenario that the European Union has been working. The participation of the European Union in ship crews is, as you can see, quite low. And even in countries of OECD, we can see that there's only a participation of approximately 30%. So what is sustaining in terms of work, in terms of crews, the world fleet is mainly Asia and the Indian subcontinent, that represent approximately 50% of this. Once again, all these scenarios here are based on the current technology. I don't consider myself old, so to say, but given the experience and the life experience that I've had in maritime transport, when I began, crews were approximately the double than what we see nowadays in each ship. A ship that would transport 200 TEUs needed a crew that what the MSC Oscar would need nowadays, for example, and this has been diminishing gradually. When I started working, we still had the figure. So we had a man that handled exclusively communication, that was the radio technicians. And then there was the chief radio technicians and the apprentice radio technicians. So there were several degrees to reach the post of radio technicians. Most ships also had nurses on board, and now medical care has come to the responsibility regarding health in the ships has shifted, not to mention functions that existed in the more technical part in the ship, for example, the installation of propellers and how to generate energies. We had, for example, someone who, the fireman, so to say. We had which is the function that has been, that now is to all the crew. There were competences that were exclusive from one person on board, and this responsibility has been transferred to all the crew, and so we extinguished many work posts. So here we're speaking about an horizon of 5 years approximately, and here the evolution won't be so strong as we can imagine, but all these evolutions imply the current technology. But the European Union has been working on some strategies to try and fight this lack of crew that we can see in the world fleet. Even in my profession, what we are projecting for the future is a lack of people. Pilots have been officials of merchant navy for a long time, but nowadays we are missing these officials in the recruiting area. In some countries like Australia, they already found some alternative strategies to lead with this problem. So they are directly training pilots instead of merchant navy officials. Some things that were done in Europe as well is to recruit pilots that come from these areas, from other nationalities. Maritime transport, transport by inland waterways, it's no longer such an intensive transport in terms of workforce, in terms of need of the work factor, and a greater part of this work factor works on the Rhine River because it was more dynamic and it moves greater quantities of goods. Can we see the videos of the case study? The last case study? Well, we're running out of time, so we could just watch the videos. Not the fright because we lost the opportunity to show it here, just the last one. It's just a slide with 2 videos. Oh no, I thought you had that other slide. So there is indeed a series of strategies to try and compensate that lack of crews. For a long time, the European Commissioner that supervised that area, Mr. Valente Oliveira, a Portuguese gentleman, his vision was to increase the skills of the members of the crew trained in Europe to be able to take aboard a greater value, and taking on board a greater value, they could have more qualified salaries, and that could foster, encourage the increase of the demand for the crew. And so more people would go work on board. I don't believe that there were great results, and I didn't see very concrete initiatives to put this vision to reality. As it's almost 7 p.m., I would just like to refer here in terms of crews what is nowadays the international regulation of the International Organization of Labor that entered into force in 2013, and who gives some legal regulations for people working on board. These are simple things that for us are acquired, for example, the right to vacations, the right to the limitation of the work day, also monthly and weekly, but there are still rules for the conditions of habitability on board. It is more and more mandatory for the ships to have some offer, for the crews to have something to do during their free time, for example, a library. And so we have to have some minimum mandatory habitability conditions. There must be some light points with some dimension, some pre-established dimension. There are specific rules for what must be the light entrances, the thermic protection and isolation, everything that might contribute to comfort and habitability criteria. Of course, vibrations, noise, all these controls that have been more and more controlled nowadays, and all of this has to be inspected. And each state can intervene nowadays in 3 different ways. So we can see in the technical part that the state can intervene in 2 ways, as a representative state and as a port state. And here in this convention, I believe Portugal has not signed it yet, but the convention has been approved in the Assembly of in the Republic Assembly, so it's entering into force, and each state can intervene in 3 ways: as a port state, as a representative state, and as a state of residence of the crew members. So if it's a crew member who is Portuguese, or 2 crew members who are Portuguese, who are navigating in a Panama ship, the Portuguese state can verify all these conditions of these habitability conditions of the Convention of 2006. The last challenge I have here for you is what you have here in your sheets. Since it entered into force, there have been some detentions of ships related to infractions to the MLC 2006 convention. The most dynamic countries in this area have been the countries of Australia, so the percentage of inspections has been far superior. Inspections related to MLC, of course, but it's been an area that has been broadened and that has been covered by Europe, both in the ports, also in the United States, in the ports, with great detention rates of ships in Australia. But everywhere in the world there's been some dynamics in applying this convention, in putting it to practice. So what I'd like to ask you is, us as stakeholders, as participants of the activity in the port, what can we do as a society, individually, to contribute to a better fiscalization and a better implementation of this convention? Because I believe that everyone is concerned with it. As stakeholders, as forwarders, if I want to maintain my image in the market, I have to have accountability in environmental and social terms. I have to be accountable for the impact of my activity, both in environmental and social terms. And I have to trace this activity in all the points, from the moment where I produce to the moment where I receive, including the transport. In both activities, this is done with schemes of social responsibility certification. The most famous one is CA 8000, that is from an organization that is non-governmental and that is North American, and it establishes standards in terms of social responsibility that companies try to keep, and they are audited to this end. So it's a referential that is audited, such as those we are used to work here. For example, the ISO 9001, or for people who have responsibility in terms of environmental responsibilities, the ISO referential for the environment and the ISO referential for health and work. The 8000 is just for social responsibility, but in these areas we must also have the minimum wage. It has to be quantified in terms of the resident states of each country. So the minimum that each person needs to live in a dignified way in terms of habitability, in terms of food, in terms of clothing, in terms of education. So just 2 minutes for you to give me some input on what we can do as a port, as a society, for this convention on work protection aboard to be observed. I'm sorry, forgive me for that passion that I have for this theme, but it's really a theme that is very dear to my heart, and I've been quite involved in it. It can be simple things. It doesn't have to be anything too complex. If I have a shuttle that takes the crew members and takes them to the mall, that would be a great participation, for example, in terms of observing the convention regarding the work on board, maritime work. Simple things. It doesn't have to be anything very complex. What the convention wants to achieve is to improve the life conditions of maritime workers. That's it. Suggest you to watch these cases that we couldn't watch in the video, and if you have 3 or 5 minutes to spend, I think it's worth watching those videos, these 3 videos. These are 3 visions of the future of intermodal transport and 1 vision of e-freight. I had here some suggestions. My suggestions, some of them, others taken from some studies that I think that they could participate into the maritime functions developed on board in areas that are a bit lateral than those who were defended by the European Commissioner. Some are personal comments, others are from literature and investigation researches that were made in the area, but I believe that all of this could improve the attractiveness of the maritime activities, especially regarding the impact on family life, to make this this profession more attractive. Well, personally, one of the main reasons that drove me to switch sea activity to an activity on land, it was the impact that it had on my family life. So an idea could be to have shorter journeys, so to spend less time at sea, since lots of companies try to distribute equally the time spent at sea with the time on vacation, but still maintaining the wage structure. That's what is being done in Nordic countries that have quite high wage levels and that have and so there's some attractiveness related to these sea activities. There's a greater stability in the workplace, more opportunities to improve in the career with trainings, especially training opportunities, that is, these opportunities for the family to be aboard as well. Just 2 more minutes. I still see this I still find it quite pleasing, especially in the Netherlands. There are still simultaneously ship owners and crew members who still have this figure. As we know here in Porto, we all have a cousin or a nephew who bought a truck and who does some freight work with their truck. In Holland, there's this figure with smaller ships, but the ship owner, who is also the commander of the ship, can have the luxury to bring his family on his journey with him. I had the opportunity to be in contact with a pilot that brings his wife, his children, his cat, and his dog with him to his journeys. So this is indeed things that make this profession more attractive. Not having this negative impact on family life, for example. This applies to the periods while the children are small, during their vacation time. The family might not be available for it, of course. But when they do, it's quite pleasant to see this kind of initiatives. The attractiveness that maritime life had was at a level of a passion for me. I have a great passion for navigation, but I felt this very important negative impact, and at least, well, it diminishes it. Regarding maritime work, what can we do to verify the convention or to implement the convention or to try and improve the work conditions of the maritime crew members? I thought about a situation while the ship is in the port. Maybe there might be some infrastructures dedicated to the crew member that might promote these three last points. That is the improved access to cheaper communication, but also the communication between members of different crews so that they could cross knowledge and also try and know the conditions of the other ships, and also that in these infrastructures there might be an independent representative who might try to gather among the crew members considerations about the life conditions within the ship. Thank you. So one of the very important dispositions of the convention is the possibility that each crew member should be able to complain about the conditions aboard in an independent entity in the port area. Just to complement it, it's one of the greatest needs that I see in the crews. It's that part of communication. The first thing they ask me, sometimes informally, is where they can buy, for example, communication cards for their cell phones. So we have here at the port of Leixões 3 to 4 people who go aboard to sell these cards. This is very important because communication within the ship as the ship is sailing is quite expensive. Satellite supported communication is quite expensive and not accessible to all the crew members. Here on the same point of Gustavo and the point that we also already mentioned, the impact on the family life, I believe that from the moment the ship is in the port, there are very restrictive rules regarding the availability of one crew member in the eventuality of having their family members living in the same territory area. I think that there's still a lot of regulation and legislation that limits the possibility of the crew member to go back to his family. And I think that there should be some improvement done in this area to compensate the question of the crew members spending a lot of time at sea away from their family. I think it's very important. I should say that it's the policy of a lot of companies now, and it's the policy here of APDL to try to conciliate better what is the family life and our professional life. So our professional life cannot smother our family life. Of course, it's much more difficult to put into practice in maritime work, but it's still the area where it is most necessary. Carlos.
Well, my idea is, according with what Gustavo said, have a role of support to the crew, a psychologist, some speaks with them, the work conditions board, and a more customized to touristic itineraries for the center of the city, a touristic city, right? Go take some walks, and it's a good option to increase the quality of life for those who are working on the sea. It's funny because I focus the same thing that Gustavo and Carlos said, which is a possibility of having professionals in ports dedicated to fiscalize the safety and housing conditions within the ships. We have the control state of the port that is made by BTM, which is a delegation of a generation that manages maritime resources, that makes the fiscalization of the housing conditions on board and the conditions in which this convention is applied. This and all the others related with ships, Marpol, Solars. So the state of the port has personnel dedicated for these verifications. We need to have them because of the obligations that we have on European land. To validate all the questions of health and leisure areas for the crew. And, in part of the communication of the crew list and the scale of work that those members of the crew work in order to validate, and with the supply that of energy to the ship to supply also communication, free communication, because the cost is almost next to nothing to the port. So this can be supplied for free. Off the record, but I need to tell it, I already suggested internally to have a Wi-Fi network. Not only it could be made because the ships themselves have needs of taking care of the management of the ship. They need to send and receive many data when they are in the port. So this could be useful for the area of commercial management of the ship and for the management of crews also. It could have both components. Joanna, do you have? Well, we have Andrea made a set of suggestions that are quite practical beginning from better access to internet for maritime personnel, better food, better better care for human resources, for complaints that they may have, as Gustavo said, ombudsman or an agent to represent workers. Also, and things, funnier things, for example, parties for crews, journeys and trips for crews in order for them to take advantage of the advantage that they are moving and they are in different cities. This would have an impact. He says that the life of the crew is more important also for the journey of the ship to have more serenity and productivity instead of action. An impact, okay. Just to finish, this responsibility or this idea of welcoming the crews inland was during all these years made by some religious missions that through what is called seaman centers and seaman clubs have made it possible for crews to have at least a space where they could have some conviviality. They could be with each other with some limitations, of course, the needs that the crews have nowadays of libraries and libraries on these conviviality centers. This was a need that with the communications has a fundamental role, not the library, of course. But today we have crews with a religious background that are different. It's not so equal as it was 20 or 30 years ago. Today we have a lot of crews with religious background from the Islam, for example, from Hindu, that need an attention or even non-religious. It would be more broader or an attention with a religious basis that can be in accordance with their own beliefs. And it became an obligation that the convention that each contracting state can create an inland infrastructure in ports, something that can offer these basic services to crews. What they did previously, seaman centers of some religious organizations, now becomes a task of the contracting state. This is the final order of they are telling us to exit. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience for this extra half an hour. And I hope that you enjoy tomorrow of the class of Commander Cunha of IT that gives support to intermodality. The concept of e-freight that I will send you on the video will be certainly approached by Commander Cunha in a more detailed way that I could approach. So it was a pleasure to be with you. If you want to be kind enough to send me